Thank you for taking the time to stream or download this episode. I don't take your support and data for granted. Now, this episode documents my journey in dealing with the loss of a job. Jobs can be so important, right? They can form part of one's identity, particularly Mojozi. I can't go to a braai without someone asking me what I do for a living. Well, back then when we used to have braais. If you ever find yourself in a situation of suddenly not having employment, what do? How did you manage the situation? What tips or tools can you give me? Secondary to my situation, which is nothing compared to what other people have gone through lately, I'm also sharing other people's stories. Some people have dealt with death, some have dealt with loneliness, some with finances or loss of finances. We have all seen shit, basically. The story started last week. I started by chatting to my wife to get her input. She didn't hold back. If you missed that episode, maybe start there and come back to this one. I called a former colleague of mine, one who went through a Section 189, the official title for a retrenchment process. Section 189, according to the Labour Relations Act, permits employers to dismiss employees for operational requirements. These are defined as requirements based on economic, technological, structural, or similar needs of the employer. I was retrenched, she wasn't. We worked in the same department, we were part of the same management team. Every day we shared our fears and our thoughts on the whole process. How is she managing with the guilt of surviving, if there is any guilt at all? My colleague's name is Millicent Mulobi. We are currently on level 3 lockdown. Even though Millie and I have had our first shot of the Pfizer vaccine, feeling very good, we decided it's best to talk via Zoom. As a result, there's a bit of a discrepancy in audio quality between myself and Millie, so please excuse that. Millie is a wife, mom to 2 girls. She is a Mrs. South Africa 2020 finalist. Professionally, she has around 15 years experience working across multiple industries and platforms. Name all the major media players. Millie has probably worked for them or with them. My first question to Millie is to get her reaction to initially receiving the news that she could potentially lose her job. Remember, Millie and I went through the same process working for the same company. When we started, her and I had no idea which one of us would eventually lose their job.
For me, it was extremely difficult. First time having to go through something like that. So professional work that I have been doing, I've been working particularly in the field that I'm working in for the past 15 years. So for the very first time, I had to go through Section 189. So I didn't know what it was all about. And I did try my best to immerse myself with the knowledge from the internet, from people that I thought knew better, colleagues, yourself. I think most of the things I also relied on you as a colleague. Yeah, just like different people, even outside of the fields that I was working in. And a very close friend of mine had gone through the same process. And I can imagine as well, it was also difficult for people that are in the leadership, of the organization, because I think it's not a nice thing having to be the bearer of bad news to people. I mean, but if the business is not doing well, what are the things that you have to look into? Is Section 189 the best solution? And if the organization finds that Section 189 was the best solution to provide in trying to preserve other jobs and still go ahead, with business as usual.
It's very kind of Millie to say that in my little way, I assisted her in getting through this. To tell you the truth, during the consultations with the CCMA, I was very chilled. Not only because I genuinely thought that I won't be fired like that, but because I learned with my time at MTV that a job is a job. It's not yours to keep. You do your best while you still have it, but by death or by design, the job will end. MTV was the worst and best work situation for me so far, but that's a story for another day. As kolapos, lagu retrenchment. Millie highlighted something that we didn't pay too much attention to. The management team. It must have been tough for them to make these decisions, unless they're psychopaths, which they're not. They're very nice people because I know them, but they must have felt like shit going through this process. I actually know someone who's an HR director for a large multinational. I put this scenario to her because she knows HR things and she has dealt with a Section 189 before. Her name is Lorette Makubele. I've got a full episode with Lorette coming up soon. For now, this is how she felt when going through Section 189 as a professional implementing this thing and just as a human being with feelings.
I'm human too, you know? I had to call a pregnant lady to tell her, your job is potentially redundant. Yeah. As she cried, I was crying there with her. And that was one of the worst days of my life because the whole day, from morning till 4 o'clock, I was in meetings one by one telling people that you're going to potentially lose your job. And you just go through those emotions. It's tough. It's tough because then, like when I'm done, then I would go to my boss or go to my colleagues and just cry in the office. We cry together. But it needs to be done because as an organization, this is the journey we've committed to. So some management decisions, you don't necessarily have to agree with them. It's not even your decision. Your responsibility is to implement.
This thing is hard for everybody concerned. Now, I'm fortunate to have a supportive wife and a great support structure from my sister, my in-laws, friends, and even colleagues. And some people don't have that, unfortunately. What kind of support does Millie have? And I'm curious as to how her husband and her family took the news that she could potentially lose her job, and what kind of conversations was she having at home?
Obviously, I did try my best not to bring, I don't want to say negativity or panic into the family because, it was really hard. But the one thing my husband and I have been discussing to say that he has gone through it in his life, retrenchment, etc. And he also gave me a lot of support to say that should it happen that you get retrenched, know that don't take it that it has anything to do with you or your craft or the amount of work that you put into the company or the value thereof that you put into the company. Understand it from a business perspective. So I leaned on him to explain because he's also very understanding when it comes to labor relations issues. So he helped me quite a lot. Look, you can go through this thing, and at the end of the day, don't ever take it personal. It could have been anyone. It could go either way. I think the support was what helped me to go through the process.
I wondered if there was a time where Millie thought she would get fired. Like, now this is it. Throughout my process, there was no such time where I thought, when I'm understanding hamba. But I was comfortable that there is a possibility that you might leave. So losing the job was not the issue. Actually succumbing and losing a job to a Section 189 is something that never really crossed my mind.
Yes. So there was that point. And obviously when I reached it, I think it was the time when my line manager couldn't give me any, guarantee because she didn't have it either, to say that, look, just prepare yourself. And if you think that there's any other opportunities outside what you are currently doing that you think you can apply for, please do so because you don't want to find yourself in a situation where, all those are closed off because you're only just looking for this. And if someone comes, because now Section 189 say that if someone comes and applies for a role that you have been doing and that person is deemed more qualified with more experience, and then how they present themselves, during the interview, because it was a whole process that they had explained to us how it was going to go. And when she said to me that don't only look at the role that you are currently doing, look at other roles and apply for those roles as well. And I went with that because, there were no guarantees. Anyone could have gone. And I also felt that if I go, I want to go having tried all avenues, But then again, my husband kept on petting on me to say that don't be careful as well. Say that you might say you want to apply for this role. And because you are trying to build a career here, how's that going to serve you in the long run? You would rather, have a look at what you are currently doing and at least look at something that is on par with what you are doing. Don't say, for instance, as an example, don't go take a junior role because you're saying that you want to remain within the company. If your objective about your career is not to grow it and just to remain employed, then yes, by all means.
Sure, that's a fine line, isn't it? Take a junior position with less pay or lose your job. What kind of support do you think employees going through this process require? To be fair, our company did provide emotional support and financial support from an external service provider, and I chose not to take up any of those services. And secondly, why do you think a lot of us don't take up these services that are provided for in any case, and they're part of your employment contract, so they are there for us to use them as employees, whether or not you're going through a retrenchment process? I wondered from Millie's perspective what she thought was the best kind of support and what really worked for her.
I think the support, that one needs, and I'm just going to exclude myself just for a while because, I have gotten the support and, in all angles, whether at home and in the company offering, the support to speak to different, counselors or psychologists. I think that kind of a support is very important. What I think the mistake that we do, including myself, is that to never take the mental health support, because you're sort of thinking that I don't want to stigmatize myself to seem as if I'm not coping. I've got this. And I think that's where we have it all wrong, because I actually think that each and every person needs to see a therapy, a counselor, particularly at times like that, and just in general, make it a norm.
Pharma Dynamics polled more than 1,200 South African adults with the aim of understanding how the pandemic has affected mental health in the country. These stats are based on a summary published on globalcitizen.org, published in October 2020, and it was written by Khanyi Mlaba. The survey found that 56% of adults are experiencing higher levels of emotional and psychological stress than they were before the pandemic. A large percentage of people experienced work and employment-related stress because of the pandemic, with 53% of respondents reporting that they had either lost their job, taken a pay cut, or had to close their business. Although respondents are aware of their increased stress levels, most have struggled to find a healthy coping mechanism, as roughly 65% of them have admitted to neglecting their health. In order to cope, 81% of respondents turned to unhealthy food, 20% turned to alcohol, 18% to cigarettes, 6% to smoking cannabis, and 22% have relied on antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication. Nearly half of the respondents were interested in seeing a therapist or receiving external mental health support. However, they were limited due to a lack of finances or access. As we've discussed, in terms of when you're permanently employed, you have access to external services where you can get help of any kind, whether it's mental or financial or anything. Lorette is back to answer from a company perspective. How do employees feel about these services, and what is the response rate towards them?
Most companies have always have access to things like iCares or Kaelo. There's a few of them, and we are also partnered with LifeWorks at the moment. They've always been there. And managers especially go through training to also because it's not about these companies, these employee assistance programs, they're not only about counseling. There's financial advice, there's legal advice, and there's just management advice. So as a new manager, I'm not sure what to do, and I'm embarrassed to ask for help, pick up the call, ask them. Actually, the take on of these services as a company, we know, and they tell us at first, it's about 13%. 13% of your staff are going to take it. Anything higher than that is wow, it's impressive. Anything less than that is also a bit worrisome, because I'm talking, you see all these services that I've mentioned, when someone is going through a divorce and we know about it, we then say, listen, in your own personal capacity, these people have please call me services. You don't even need to use your own airtime if you don't have. Just find a separate place, or even at home, just, send them that SMS, they'll call you back. My son started bedwetting, and I'm not quite sure if there's some emotional issue or maybe it's just a physiological issue that's happening at this time. Call somebody, they'll guide you on where do you need to do? So like I'm saying, it's when it's services that need to be communicated and over communicated so that, as a company, why are you even investing in it? So counseling doesn't have to be always with a psychologist. It has to be, are you free to talk to someone? Do you have someone to talk to? Are you free to talk, to be honest with your emotions so that then someone can at least give you the guidance and just show you the right way to be? So when we suggest counseling is I know people don't, and I don't really want to say black people, just people are not comfortable talking with counseling. So it's not the first step. But, I am a qualified mental health first aider, and someone else in our company, we went for the training together, and more of my colleagues are going there. It's something I had not even thought that I would want to be until COVID started happening and we could see the impact of it. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, but I am trained to recognize the effects of it, I know how to talk to someone and help them seek the proper health.
What's good to note is that you don't necessarily need a professional to get through this thing, right? You just have to find someone to talk to. Anybody. Try as hard as you can to find some sort of support. This can be from a friend, colleague, parent. You just have to talk it out. To her credit, Millie still seeks professional help and it seems to be working for her. She finds it extremely helpful.
Extremely helpful because now that you have gone through, there's actually someone that put up to say that we like to put this notion that, if you are permanently employed, at least things will go well for you. There's nothing of that sort. You're not permanently employed. So seeking professional and mental help, to help you to say that, sort of prepare you. There's a lot of uncertainty that can come through. Be vigilant at all times. Seek the help. I've seen, for me personally, it has helped me. It's continuing to help me.
There is something called survivor's guilt. What's about good moving, man? How only one person survives a plane crash. They spend the entire movie making life decisions based on that incident or feeling really bad about it or guilty. In medical terms, based on an article from MSN.com, this was published in March 2021. Survivor's guilt is classified as a symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder. Symptoms often include intense feelings of guilt and shame for surviving an event that others didn't. With survivor's guilt, some suffer from flashbacks, lack of motivation, fear, nausea, sleep problems, and in intense cases, suicidal tendencies. Survivor's guilt is often seen in first responders, veterans, and those that survive natural disasters, mass shootings, or car crashes. It's even been linked in times of economic hardship to those who still have income or a job. The article quotes research published by the American Psychiatric Association. Did Millie feel any guilt at all? Was part of her feeling like, how could I possibly survive this thing and others didn't? Or is she just cruising by? You're getting it right.
It did. Even now, I still do. Because even I look every day for any opportunity within the organization. And I recommend people all the time. I do. Somehow, I feel like it's my fault that I survived and other people did not. I do, and I'm trying every day when I see a post, and I'm saying that we can't. And this is another thing that my therapist has helped me to say that you've gone through this process. You're not going to be able to save everyone all at once. One person at a time. If there's one person that you can help, one person at a time. But I do. To answer your question, I do. I feel guilty every single time to know that there's someone out there that needs, a job and is not able to get it and doesn't have, the opportunities to go elsewhere. As we've seen that, the market is very tight, things are not going well. So I do feel guilty, and to a certain degree, I sort of feel like I must take responsibility. Of them not being, of them not surviving. So yeah, I do.
And those are the remnants of survivor's guilt in the context of a work environment. where people are losing their jobs and you're not. In closing, what is Millie's advice for people that are listening to this podcast and potentially could be facing a Section 189 or going through it at the moment? Any words of advice, tips, tools, anything that people out there can use that you found beneficial?
I think to understand that anything can happen, really, and to also not put yourself under pressure. And I cannot emphasize this hard enough, to speak to a professional therapist, a counselor, just a professional ear, someone that's going to give you, sound advice, someone that's going to help you with your mental health, because I think it's extremely important to safeguard your mental health.
I wonder how many other people have guilt over surviving anything during this period. To be honest, Millie has nothing to be guilty about. As Lorette said, retrenchment or Section 189 is a no-fault termination. What is cool about Millie, though, is that she is still on the lookout for others who might need work. If you also have a story to share about your experiences with retrenchment and or job loss, please check out our Facebook page at 1730 Media. Like, comment, share. Let us know what you think so far. The music is Brooklyn in the Bridge by Nico Stuff and The Missing 11th by DJ Williams. Thank you to Millie and Lorette for their contribution. Our sources are pharmadynamics.co.za, globalcitizen.org, and msn.com. I'll post all these articles on our Facebook page at 1730 Media. See you next time. Hola.